The wind cut through my jacket like it had a personal grudge. October in Pine Valley always felt colder than the weather app promised. I was pulling into the park entrance, same route I'd taken for 15 years, when I saw them. Twin blonde Hurricanes and matching SUVs, blocking the gate like they owned the place. Both vehicles parked sideways, hazard lights blinking. The Karen sisters. That's what everyone called them, though I never bothered learning which was which. 40-something, identical down to their angry expressions and designer workout clothes. The one on the left stepped out first, waving a handmade sign that looked like a third grader's art project. Private property, no trespassing. Her sister emerged from the other car, phone already recording. "Excuse me, sir," left Karen called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "This area is now private property. We've privatized it through Emergency Homeowners Association procedures." I rolled down my window, engine still running. "Ladies, this is Millbrook Park. Been public land since before you were born." "Right." Karen stepped closer, still filming. "Not anymore. Emergency vote passed 3 days ago. 78% approval." That's when I reached into my glove compartment and pulled out something I hadn't looked at in months. A small metal tag, scratched and weathered, with numbers that meant something once upon a time. Park Service property marker, plot designation, 1953A. I held it up so both cameras could see. "This little piece of metal says otherwise." Left Karen squinted at it, trying to look official. "What is that supposed to prove? You could have made that in your garage." "Could have," I said, feeling something old and familiar stirring in my chest. The same feeling I'd had 30 years ago when some bureaucrat tried to tell me federal land was suddenly off limits. But I didn't. "Right," Karen lowered her phone slightly. "You can't just flash some random metal and expect us to—" "Park Service Property Control," I interrupted. "Issued 1953, renewed every decade since. This land was granted federal protection status under the Community Recreation Act." I kept my voice level, but let a little steel creep in. "Which means, ladies, what you're doing right now isn't just wrong, it's illegal." The wind picked up, rustling the papers in left Karen's hands. Her confidence flickered for just a moment. "Federal land doesn't matter if the Homeowners Association has jurisdiction," she said. But something in her voice had changed, less certain, more defensive. I shifted the truck into park and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots, that sound that always reminded me of decisions being made, lines being drawn. "Tell me something," I said, walking toward them slow and easy. "When exactly did this emergency vote happen? Because I've been getting HOA newsletters for 8 years, and funny thing, I never got notice of any emergency meeting." Both sisters exchanged a look. Quick, but I caught it. "Some residents," right Karen said, "were deemed non-essential for the voting process." Non-essential. I turned the words over in my mouth like they tasted bad. "That what you're calling it?" The metal tag felt warm in my palm. 30 years since retirement, but some instincts never fade. These two were hiding something bigger than a simple land grab. The question was, what? And why they'd picked the wrong man to try it on. I tucked the tag back into my jacket pocket, but kept my hand on it. Sometimes the smallest things carry the most weight. "Ladies," I said, "I think we need to have ourselves a longer conversation." The wind died suddenly, leaving us in perfect silence. Even the trees seemed to be holding their breath, waiting to see who would blink first. The silence stretched between us like a tripwire nobody wanted to step on. Left, Karen clutched her homemade sign tighter, knuckles going white against the poster board. Right, Karen had stopped recording, but kept the phone ready like she was expecting trouble. I was about to give it to her. "Emergency procedures," I said, letting the words hang in the cold air. Funny how emergencies always seem to happen when certain people aren't around to vote. "The HOA has full legal authority," left Karen started. "Over private residential areas, sure." I pulled out my phone, slow and deliberate. "But this?" I gestured toward the tree line behind them. "This is federal parkland, has been since Eisenhower was president." "Right." Karen stepped forward, phone rising again. "You're trespassing on privatized community space. We have the right to remove you." That's when I heard it, the low rumble of a diesel engine coming up the access road. Big truck, moving fast. The sound made my stomach drop because I knew what was coming next. A red pickup with "Emergency Tree Service" painted on the side pulled up behind the Karen sisters' SUVs. Two men in hard hats got out, followed by a third guy chewing tobacco, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Morning, ladies," the tobacco chewer called out. "We're here about the hazardous tree removal." And left Karen beamed like she'd just won the lottery. Perfect timing. This gentleman was just leaving. "What hazardous trees?" I asked, though the knot in my gut was already telling me the answer. The foreman spit into the gravel. "Got a work order here. 3 oaks along the eastern boundary, marked as immediate danger to power lines." He held up a clipboard. "Emergency authorization from the Homeowners Association. $12,000 job." I stared at the trees he was pointing toward. They were beautiful old oaks, probably 50 years mature, sitting right on what these sisters claimed was their new property line. They weren't anywhere near power lines. "Those trees aren't hazardous," I said. "Says here they are." The foreman shrugged. "Also says if the property owner doesn't pay for removal, we put a lien on adjacent properties for public safety costs." Right, Karen's smile could have powered a small city. "Mr. Harris lives right next to the affected area. Guess that makes it his problem too." The pieces clicked together like bullets loading into a chamber. They weren't just grabbing the park. They were setting me up for a $12,000 bill I couldn't fight, because officially, according to their paperwork, I was the closest property owner to a public safety hazard. "You can't be serious," I said. "Dead serious." Left Karen folded her arms. "Either you pay your share of the emergency tree removal, or we file with the county for involuntary lien placement. Your choice." The chainsaw crew was already unloading equipment, the morning air filled with the smell of gasoline and bar oil. One of the workers fired up a saw, the engine screaming to life. That sound hit me like a punch to the chest. Those trees had been there when I bought my house 8 years ago. They'd been there when my wife Sarah and I used to walk the park trails on Sunday mornings, back when she was still healthy enough for walks. "Stop," I said, loud enough to carry over the chainsaw. The foreman looked up. "You got money to pay the emergency fee?" I didn't. My retirement pension covered the basics, but $12,000 might as well have been $12 million. "Give me 24 hours, I said. "I need to make some calls." "Right." Karen laughed high and sharp. "Emergency work doesn't wait for phone calls. These trees come down today, or the county gets involved tomorrow." The chainsaw bit into the first oak with a sound like the world ending. Sawdust flew in golden clouds, and something inside my chest cracked right along with the bark. I pulled out the metal tag again, gripping it so tight the edges cut into my palm. Federal land, protected status. There had to be something, some angle they hadn't thought of. But as I watched 50 years of growth turn into scrap lumber, I realized these sisters had played this game before. They knew exactly which buttons to push and which laws to bend just enough to stay on the legal side of theft. The question was, what else were they planning that I didn't know about yet? The second oak started falling, and I made myself a promise. Whatever this was really about, whatever they were really after, I was going to find out, even if it cost me everything I had left. The smell of fresh sawdust and diesel exhaust hung in the air like a funeral shroud. By noon, 3 generations of oak trees had been reduced to lumber scraps and wood chips. The Karen sisters supervised from their matching SUVs, sipping coffee from travel mugs like they were watching a particularly entertaining movie. I'd spent the morning on the phone, calling every number I could think of. County offices, state parks department, even my old supervisor from the park service. Same story everywhere. "We'll look into it, sir. File a formal complaint. Could take 6 to 8 weeks for review." 6 to 8 weeks. The trees would be mulch by then. That's when I decided to try the library. Pine Valley Public Library sat on Main Street like it had been there since the town was founded. Probably had. Margaret Chen, the head librarian, had been there almost as long. 70-something, sharp as a tack, and the closest thing our town had to a walking encyclopedia. I found her in the local history section, organizing boxes of old documents that looked like they predated electricity. "Tom Harris," she said without looking up. "Heard you had some excitement at the park this morning." News traveled fast in small towns. "Margaret, I need to see the original land grants for Millbrook Park, anything from the 1950s. She straightened up, adjusting her glasses. "That's oddly specific. Mind if I ask why?" I showed her the metal tag. "Someone's claiming the park was privatized through an HOA vote. I think they're lying, but I need proof." Margaret's expression darkened. "The Karen sisters." You know about this? Hard not to. They've been in here 3 times this month, asking about property records and land grants. She paused, weighing her words carefully. Tom, there's something you should know. Some of those documents they were asking about, they're missing. The floor felt like it shifted under my feet. Missing how? Gone. Removed from the archives about 3 months ago. Someone with official county credentials checked them out. She led me to a card catalog that looked older than both of us. But here's the thing about libraries. We keep copies of everything. She pulled out a slim folder marked Federal Land Grants, Pine Valley County, 1953-1955. The originals might be gone, she said, voice dropping to a whisper. But I made photocopies of everything important years ago. Call it professional paranoia. My hands shook as I opened the folder. There it was. Federal Grant Authorization, 1953A, signed by the Secretary of the Interior. Millbrook Park designated as permanent public recreational space under federal protection. No local authority could override it without congressional approval. This is it, I breathed. This proves the land can't be privatized. Margaret nodded grimly. It also explains why someone wanted the originals to disappear. I looked up at her. You think the Karen sisters stole official documents? I think those sisters are smarter than they look, and I think they have help. She pulled out another folder, this one marked Recent Property Transfers, Pine Valley. Look at this. The papers showed a pattern that made my blood run cold. Over the past year, 3 properties adjacent to Millbrook Park had been purchased by something called Valley Development Partners. Each sale happened right after the owners got hit with massive HOA fines for mysterious violations. Margaret, I said slowly, what if this isn't about the park at all? What if it's about the land around it? She pointed to a map in the back of the folder. See these red circles? Every property Valley Development Partners bought. Now, look at this. She traced a line connecting all the properties. They form a complete border around the park. If they can privatize the public land in the middle, they control access to everything, I finished. They can develop the whole area however they want. The library suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. I gathered up the photocopies, hands moving faster than my brain. Tom, Margaret said softly, be careful who you trust with this. If I'm right about what's happening here, there's serious money involved. People do dangerous things for serious money. I was halfway to the door when she called out again. One more thing. The person who checked out those original documents, the signature on the request form, looked an awful lot like county clerk handwriting. But the name was wrong. What do you mean wrong? The real county clerk was on vacation that week. I checked. I drove home through streets that suddenly felt foreign, like someone had redrawn all the maps while I wasn't looking. The photocopies sat on my passenger seat like a bomb waiting to go off. I had proof the Karen sisters were wrong about the park, but I also had proof of something much bigger and much more dangerous. The question now was, what was I going to do about it? I spent the rest of the afternoon studying Margaret's photocopies like they held the secrets of the universe. Every time I read through the federal land grant, I felt a little surge of hope. This was bulletproof evidence. The park couldn't be privatized, period. By evening, I'd convinced myself I had them beat. That confidence lasted exactly until my doorbell rang at 7:30. Sheriff's deputy stood on my porch, looking uncomfortable in the yellow glow of my porch light. Young guy, maybe 30, with the kind of mustache that suggested he was trying too hard to look official. Tom Harris? That's me. I'm Deputy Martinez. I need to talk to you about an incident at Millbrook Park this morning. My stomach dropped. What kind of incident? Threats made against contractors performing emergency tree removal. The complainants say you became aggressive and made statements about preventing them from completing necessary safety work. I stared at him. I asked them to give me 24 hours to verify the work order. That's aggressive? They also claim you brandished some kind of weapon, a metal object. The federal property tag. I'd held it up to show them it was official documentation. Now it was a weapon. Deputy, I showed them a Park Service property marker to prove the land is federally protected. These women are trying to privatize public land illegally. Martinez pulled out a notebook, flipping through pages like he was following a script. According to the complainants, you have no legal standing to challenge properly authorized HOA actions. The tree removal was approved by emergency vote and poses immediate danger to power lines. There are no power lines near those trees. Sir, I'm going to need you to stay away from the park area until this gets sorted out. The complainants have filed for a temporary restraining order. The words hit me like a slap. A restraining order? For what? Harassment, intimidation, interference with lawful emergency procedures. He handed me a folded paper. Court hearing is scheduled for next Friday. Until then, you're not allowed within 200 feet of the park or any HOA-related activities. I unfolded the paper with hands that wanted to shake. Official county letterhead, judge's signature, the whole 9 yards. The Karen sisters had turned my attempt to defend public land into a legal attack on me. This is insane, I said. I'm the victim here. Sir, I'm just serving papers. You'll have your chance to tell your side to the judge. After Martinez left, I sat in my kitchen staring at the restraining order until the words blurred together. 200 feet from the park. That meant I couldn't even walk my normal route to downtown. Couldn't check on what other emergency procedures they might be planning. The phone rang. Local number I didn't recognize. Tom, female voice, nervous. This is Jennifer Walsh from Pine Valley Realty. We met last year when you were thinking about refinancing. I remembered her. Aggressive sales type. Always had 3 phone calls going at once. What can I do for you, Jennifer? I need to meet with you, tonight if possible. It's about the park situation. How do you know about... I can't talk over the phone. Can you meet me at Rosie's Diner in 20 minutes? The line went dead before I could answer. Rosie's Diner occupied the corner of Main and 3rd, the kind of place where coffee cost $1 and the pie was always fresh. Jennifer was already there when I arrived, hunched over a corner booth like she was trying to disappear into the vinyl. She looked different than I remembered, pale, jumpy, checking the door every few seconds. Tom, thank God you came. She leaned across the table, lowering her voice. I've been trying to figure out how to tell someone about this for weeks. Tell someone about what? The Karen sisters. They're not working alone. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through text messages. I've been the realtor on all the Valley Development Partners purchases. I thought it was just good business until I realized what they were really doing. She showed me a text thread between her and someone named Kay Sullivan. The messages made my blood freeze. Park privatization on schedule. Harris is the last holdout on Western Boundary. Neutralize his property claim, and we control the entire development zone. Restraining order filed. If legal pressure doesn't work, we move to Phase 2. What's Phase 2? Better you don't know. Just make sure your commission reports show fair market value for all forced sales. I looked up at Jennifer. Who's Kay Sullivan? I don't know. But Tom, these people aren't just grabbing land. They're planning something huge. The development company behind this, they're not local. They're based out of Chicago, and they have serious money. She pulled out another document. Bank transfer records showing payments to Valley Development Partners, totaling over $3 million. $3 million, I whispered. That's just what I've seen. Tom, they're not stealing a park. They're stealing an entire neighborhood to build something massive, and they're using the HOA to make it look legal. The diner suddenly felt too bright, too exposed. Every other customer looked like they might be listening to our conversation. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Jennifer's hands were shaking as she put her phone away. Because I grew up here. My kids play in that park, and because... She took a shaky breath. Because they offered me $50,000 to help them force you out of your house. The coffee in my mouth turned bitter. Force me out how? I don't know. They said they had alternative methods for dealing with stubborn property owners. Outside, headlights swept across the diner windows as a car pulled into the parking lot. Jennifer went white. I have to go, she said, standing up so fast she knocked over her coffee cup. Tom, be careful. These people play for keeps. She was out the door before I could stop her, leaving me alone with cold coffee and the growing certainty that I was in way over my head. The restraining order in my pocket felt heavier than it should have. If Jennifer was right, it wasn't just legal harassment. It was the opening move in something much worse. I didn't sleep that night. Every car that drove past my house made me check the windows. Every settling noise in the walls sounded like footsteps. Jennifer's warning kept echoing in my head. These people play for keeps. By morning, I'd made a decision. If they wanted to play hardball, I'd show them what 30 years in federal service had taught me about fighting dirty. First stop, the county courthouse. The clerk's office buzzed with the usual government energy, fluorescent lights, ringing phones, and people who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. I found the property records section and started digging. "Can I help you?" The clerk was maybe 25, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Jessica. "I need to see all recent property transfer documents for Valley Development Partners," I said, sliding Margaret's photocopies across the counter, specifically anything filed in the last 6 months. Jessica glanced at the federal land grant documents, and her expression changed. "You're the guy from the park thing. Word traveled fast in small towns. That's me." She lowered her voice. "Look, I'm not supposed to say this, but some of these documents—" She gestured toward a filing cabinet. "They don't add up." "What do you mean?" "The signatures, the dates. Some of this paperwork was filed before the HOA meetings that supposedly authorized it." She pulled out a folder. "See this? Emergency tree removal authorized October 15th. But the emergency HOA meeting wasn't held until October 18th. I stared at the dates. They filed the work order 3 days before they voted on it. "Gets better," Jessica whispered. "The person who filed it, names on the signature line as K. Sullivan, HOA president. But the current HOA president is Linda Martinez, has been for 2 years. K. Sullivan, the same name from Jennifer's text messages. Jessica, I need copies of everything you just showed me." She hesitated, looking around the office. "I could get in trouble. People are stealing federal land and forging government documents. You want that on your conscience?" 5 minutes later, I walked out with a stack of photocopies that proved the Karen sisters had been filing fraudulent paperwork for months. Every emergency HOA action, every property seizure, every forced sale. All of it predated the meetings that were supposed to authorize it. I was feeling pretty good about myself until I got home and found my mailbox stuffed with legal notices. HOA violation, failure to maintain approved landscaping standards, fine, $2,500. HOA violation, unauthorized modification of exterior paint color, fine, $3,000. HOA violation, parking commercial vehicle on residential property, fine, $1,500. My pickup truck apparently qualified as a commercial vehicle because it had a toolbox in the bed. $7,000 in fines, all dated yesterday, all requiring payment within 10 days or facing involuntary lien procedures. Yeah, I was reading the last notice when my phone rang. "Tom Harris? This is Frank Peterson from Peterson Construction. I hear you need some emergency home repairs." "I don't need any repairs. According to my work order, you've got foundation issues, electrical code violations, and a roof that's about to collapse. County inspector flagged your property for immediate safety intervention." My blood went cold. I never requested an inspection. "Doesn't matter. When the county flags a property as hazardous, we have to secure it within 24 hours. Costs about $15,000, but hey, better than having your house condemned, right?" I hung up and walked outside. A white van was parked across the street, county building inspection painted on the side. 2 men in hard hats stood in my front yard, clipboards in hand, measuring something with a long tape measure. "Excuse me," I called out. "What are you doing on my property?" The taller inspector looked up. "Anonymous complaint about structural safety. We're conducting a preliminary assessment." "I never consented to an inspection." "Don't need consent for public safety issues, sir." He scribbled something on his clipboard. "I'm seeing some concerning foundation settlement here. And that roof, when was it last professionally inspected?" 5 years ago. It passed with flying colors." "Well, things change." He made another note. "We'll have our full report filed by end of business today. If we find code violations, you'll have 48 hours to bring everything up to standard." I watched them work, documenting every minor imperfection, photographing every weather stain and small crack. They were building a case to condemn my house, and there wasn't a damn thing I could do to stop them. That's when I realized how completely I'd underestimated the Karen sisters. They weren't just stealing the park. They were systematically destroying anyone who stood in their way, using every legal loophole and bureaucratic weapon they could find. The restraining order kept me away from the park. The HOA fines would drain my savings. The building inspection would force me to sell or lose my house to code enforcement. By the time they were done, I'd be broke, homeless, and legally barred from fighting back. Jennifer had been right. These people played for keeps. But here's what they didn't know about me. I'd spent 3 decades dealing with bureaucrats who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I'd seen every dirty trick in the book, and I'd learned how to fight fire with fire. The white van pulled away as the sun set behind my house. I stood in my driveway holding $7,000 worth of fraudulent fines, watching my neighbors peek through their curtains like I was some kind of criminal. Tomorrow was the town's annual harvest festival. 300 people, all the local politicians, and enough cameras to make the evening news. Time to show Pine Valley exactly what the Karen sisters were really up to. Time to turn their own game against them. The Harvest Festival transformed Main Street into something out of a Norman Rockwell painting. Orange and red banners stretched between the lampposts. The high school marching band warmed up near the gazebo, and the smell of kettle corn drifted through the crisp October air. Perfect cover for what I was about to do. I arrived early before the crowds, carrying a cardboard box that contained everything I'd gathered over the past week. Margaret's photocopies, Jessica's document copies, Jennifer's text message screenshots, and my trump card, the original federal property tag that started this whole mess. The Karen sisters had set up a booth near the center of the festival. Community Improvement Initiative read the banner with professionally printed brochures and a sign-up table for concerned residents. Both sisters wore matching autumn sweaters and campaign-style buttons that said, "Progress for Pine Valley." They looked like they were running for mayor. I positioned myself at the coffee cart across the street and watched them work the crowd. Handshakes, smiles, promises about making our neighborhood safer and more valuable. Every few minutes, someone would sign their petition or drop a donation into their collection jar. By 10 o'clock, a decent crowd had gathered around their booth. That's when Mayor Hendricks climbed onto the gazebo platform to give his annual festival speech. "Friends and neighbors," his voice boomed through the PA system, "Pine Valley has always been a community that looks out for each other." I waited until he started talking about progress and community development. Then I made my move. The Karen sisters were so focused on working the crowd that they didn't notice me approaching until I was right behind their table. "Morning, ladies," I said, loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "Beautiful day for a festival." Left, Karen turned around and her smile froze when she saw me. "Tom, I thought you were..." She gestured vaguely. "Restrained from coming within 200 feet of park property? This isn't park property. This is Main Street." I set my cardboard box on their table, right next to their donation jar. "Mind if I share some information with your supporters?" "Right." Karen stepped closer, phone already in her hand. "You're harassing us? I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said, pulling out Margaret's federal land grant photocopies. "I'm sure they'd love to see these." The small crowd around their booth was starting to pay attention. Mayor Hendricks was still speaking, but people were drifting over to see what was happening. "Tom Harris, isn't it?" An older woman I recognized from the grocery store squinted at the documents. "What's all this about?" "These ladies have been telling everyone they privatized Millbrook Park through an HOA vote," I said, holding up the federal grant paperwork. "Problem is, you can't privatize federal land. Not with a vote, not with an emergency procedure, not at all." Left, Karen snatched at the papers. "Those documents are forgeries." "Are they?" I pulled out my phone and called a number I'd memorized that morning. "Federal Park Service Regional Office. Yes, I'd like to verify the status of Land Grant 1953A for Pine Valley County." While I was on hold, I noticed Jennifer Walsh standing at the edge of the crowd, looking pale but determined. She gave me a small nod. "Yes, still here," I said into the phone, making sure my voice carried. "Plot designation 1953A, Millbrook Park. Yes, I'll hold." The Karen sisters were whispering urgently to each other. Right, Karen was texting furiously on her phone. "Thank you," I said loudly, ending the call. "Federal Park Service confirms that Millbrook Park remains under permanent federal protection. Any attempt to privatize it is not only illegal, it's a federal crime." The crowd was growing larger. Someone had turned off the PA system, and Mayor Hendricks was walking over to see what was going on. "Furthermore," I continued, pulling out Jessica's document copies, "these ladies have been filing fraudulent paperwork with the county. Work orders dated before the meetings that supposedly authorized them. Signatures from people who don't exist. Left Karen's composure finally cracked. "You're lying. We have full legal authority." "From who?" I held up the papers. "K. Sullivan, HOA president." "There is no K. Sullivan. The real HOA president is Linda Martinez, and she's standing right over there wondering what the hell you've been doing in her name." I pointed to Linda Martinez, who was pushing through the crowd with a very confused expression on her face. "I never authorized any of this," Linda said, taking the documents from my hands. "Who are these people?" That's when Jennifer Walsh stepped forward. "They work for Valley Development Partners," she announced, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm the realtor who's been handling their property acquisitions. They offered me $50,000 to help them force Tom out of his house." The crowd went dead silent. Even the kids at the face painting booth stopped what they were doing. "Right. Karen tried to push past me toward the street, but Mayor Hendricks blocked her path." "I think we all need to have a conversation," he said grimly, "starting with who's been forging HOA documents and why." I pulled out my trump card, the metal property tag, the same one I'd shown them 3 days ago. "This little piece of metal is what started everything," I said, holding it up so everyone could see. "Federal Park Service Property Control, issued 1953. When I showed this to the Karen sisters at the park, they knew their whole scheme was about to fall apart." I looked directly at both sisters. "That's why they called the sheriff. That's why they got a restraining order. That's why they tried to bury me in fake fines and fraudulent inspections. They were hoping to destroy me before I could prove they were lying." Left Karen made one last desperate play. "This man is unstable. He's been harassing us for days, making threats." "The only threat here," I interrupted, "is to the people who trusted you with their community." I turned to address the crowd directly. "These women have been systematically stealing your land, your tax money, and your rights. They're not from Pine Valley. They're not even from this county. They're criminals, and they almost got away with it." The festival had gone completely quiet except for the distant sound of children playing on the swings. 300 people stood in the October sunshine, staring at two women who had just been exposed as fraudsters and thieves. Mayor Hendricks pulled out his own phone. "I'm calling the state attorney general's office and the FBI." That's when both Karen sisters finally broke and ran. They didn't get far. Deputy Martinez, the same cop who'd served me the restraining order, was waiting by their SUVs with backup. As I watched them get handcuffed in front of half the town, I fingered the old metal tag in my pocket. Sometimes the smallest things really do carry the most weight. But I wasn't celebrating yet, because I knew this was just the beginning. Valley Development Partners was still out there. The people with the real money, the ones who'd hired the Karen sisters to do their dirty work. They'd invested $3 million in this scheme, and they weren't going to just walk away because their local enforcers got arrested. The question now was, what would they try next? 3 weeks later, I stood in the same spot where the Karen sisters had tried to block my access to Millbrook Park. The morning air was crisp with the promise of winter, and the oak stumps where their emergency tree removal had happened were already sprouting new growth. The FBI investigation had moved fast once they got involved. Valley Development Partners turned out to be a shell company for a Chicago-based corporation with a history of land fraud schemes across 3 states. The Karen sisters, whose real names were Kelly and Christine Murphy, had done this before in Wisconsin and Indiana. They'd gotten away with it twice. They wouldn't get away with it a third time. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the news articles that had been coming out all week. Federal land fraud scheme exposed in small town festival. Sisters arrested for multi-million-dollar property scam. Local hero saves community park from corporate theft. Local hero. That made me laugh. I'd just been a stubborn old man who didn't like being pushed around. But the victory felt hollow somehow. Yeah, the park was safe. The fraudulent HOA fines had been voided. The building inspection that was going to condemn my house had been exposed as part of the scheme. All the neighbors who'd been forced to sell their properties were getting their homes back. Justice served, case closed, everybody lives happily ever after. Except it wasn't that simple. Because standing there in the morning silence, I realized what this whole thing had really cost me. Jennifer Walsh had been right to be scared. The night after the festival, someone broke into her real estate office and destroyed all her files. Nothing was stolen, just destroyed. The message was clear: cooperate with investigations and face the consequences. Margaret at the library got reassigned to a different branch 30 miles away. Budget cuts, they said. She packed up her local history archives and left town the same week the Karen sisters made bail. Jessica, the county clerk who had helped me expose the fraudulent documents, was fired for policy violations. Apparently, showing citizens public records without proper authorization was grounds for termination. 3 people who'd helped me fight back, all punished for doing the right thing. And me, I gotta be the hero who saved the park. I walked over to where the oak trees used to stand and knelt down beside the fresh shoots growing from the old stumps. Life finding a way, even after destruction. Maybe that was the real lesson here. My phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Good work, Tom. We could use more people like you. M. Margaret. Even in exile, she was still looking out for the community." I typed back, "Park's safe. That's what matters." Her response came immediately. "Is it? Check today's county meeting agenda." I pulled up the county website on my phone and found the public meeting schedule. There it was, buried in the middle of a dozen routine items. Discussion of eminent domain procedures for economic development projects. My blood went cold. Valley Development Partners might be gone, but the people behind them weren't giving up. They were just changing tactics. If they couldn't steal the land through fraud, they'd take it through eminent domain. Perfectly legal, perfectly devastating, and much harder to fight. I looked at the metal property tag one more time, then slipped it into my pocket. Federal protection wouldn't mean much if the county decided the park was standing in the way of economic development. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But here's what those corporate thieves didn't understand about small towns. When you threaten something people love, they don't just fight back once. They keep fighting until the threat is gone for good. I walked home through streets where half the neighbors still avoided eye contact with me. Some people see you as a hero for standing up to corruption. Others see you as a troublemaker who rocks boats that should stay steady. That's the price of winning, I guess. You save what matters, but you lose some of what made it worth saving in the first place. Sarah would have understood. She always said the hardest battles aren't the ones you fight against enemies. They're the ones you fight for principles when everyone else just wants to go along to get along. I miss her voice more than anything, but standing there in the park we used to walk together, I could almost hear her whispering, "You did good, Tom. Now do it again." The metal tag in my pocket felt warm against my fingers. Some battles you win once, others you fight every day for the rest of your life. Pine Valley was my home. Millbrook Park was my responsibility now, whether I wanted it or not. And if Valley Development Partners or whoever replaced them wanted to take another shot at stealing what belonged to the community, they'd have to go through me first. Again. I smiled, thinking about how much trouble I was probably about to cause at tonight's county meeting. Some fights are worth having twice.